This video is different from everything I have done on this channel for the past 16 days. No missile counts, no wave numbers, no oil price updates. Today I am going to tell you the complete story of how this war actually started. The decisions, the meetings, the phone calls, the men in the rooms. Because 16 days into the most consequential conflict since Iraq 2003, most Americans still do not know the full answer to the most important question of all. Why did this war start? Not what Iran did, not what Trump said at 29:30 in the morning on February 28th. The real answer. The meetings that happened months before the first bomb fell. The deception campaign that was running while peace talks were happening. The one phone call on February 23rd that set the date. And the peace deal that was days away from being signed when somebody decided to blow it up instead. 7 decisions, 7 moments, each one a door that closed, each one a choice made by a specific person in a specific room that made this war more inevitable than the one before it. By the time I give you all 7, you will understand this war in a way that 16 days of breaking news updates cannot give you. And you will be able to answer for yourself the question that Congress, the media, and the American public have not fully answered yet. Was this war necessary, or was it a choice? Let me start at the beginning. Not February 28, the real beginning. Decision 1, February 2025, Mar-a-Lago. Netanyahu presents 4 options. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and U.S. President Donald Trump began planning for a potential strike on Iran's nuclear program after a meeting in February 2025 and developed an elaborate public deception program. The Washington Post reported during the February meeting, their first under Trump's second term, Netanyahu presented Trump with 4 options on what an attack on Iran could look like. The 4 scenarios were an exclusively Israeli attack, an attack led by Israel with minimal U.S. help, full collaboration, and a U.S.-led assault. While Trump chose to give nuclear diplomacy an opportunity, the intelligence sharing and preparations for an attack continued. February 2025, a full year before the war started, Netanyahu sat across from Trump at Mar-a-Lago and handed him a menu, 4 options, 1 through 4. From Israel goes alone to America leads everything. Trump picked none of them that day. He said, give diplomacy a chance. But the preparations for all 4 options continued. The intelligence sharing continued. The target list continued to be built. The military buildup continued. And the public was told nothing. Because simultaneously, while the preparations were running, a deception campaign was also running. A public performance designed to make the world believe that war was not being planned. Decision 2, November 2025. Netanyahu sets the target. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu set the goal of assassinating Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei in November 2025. And protests inside Iran later accelerated Israeli and U.S. planning for the strike. Defense Minister Israel Katz said in an interview, already in November, we held discussions with the Prime Minister in a very small forum. The Prime Minister set the objective to eliminate Khamenei. Katz said in remarks aired by Israel's Channel 12 television. KZ said the operation had initially been planned for around mid-2026 and that Israel first prepared to carry it out alone before discussions began with U.S. President Donald Trump. November 2025, 3 months before the war started, in a very small forum, Netanyahu said those exact words. Eliminate, not degrade Iran's nuclear program, not destroy its missile capabilities, eliminate the supreme leader personally. That was the stated objective from the beginning, not regime change through military pressure. Targeted assassination of the head of state of a sovereign nation planned in November, 3 months before it happened. And then something happened in late December 2025 that changed the timeline. Iran's currency entered a free fall exacerbated by the imposition in September of new international sanctions. The economic spiral led to the outbreak of protests on December 28, 2025, which at the encouragement of the United States spread in January 2026 across Iran. Trump threatened U.S. intervention if Iranian security forces killed protesters. Nevertheless, on January 8th, security forces unleashed a brutal crackdown, killing at least 30,000 people, according to officials in Iran's Ministry of Health. 30,000 people killed by the Iranian government in January 2026 in the streets of Iranian cities, and those killings, according to Israel's own defense minister, accelerated the timeline. The plan was mid-2026. The protests and the crackdown moved it to February because the window was open, because Iran was unstable, because the regime had just murdered 30,000 of its own citizens, and the world was watching. Decision 3, April through February, the peace talks that almost worked. On April 12, 2025. Iran and the United States began a series of negotiations aimed at reaching a nuclear peace agreement following a letter from U.S. President Donald Trump to Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Trump set a 2-month deadline for Iran to reach an agreement. The first round of high-level meetings was held in Oman on April 12, 2025, led by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Both the Iranian Foreign Minister and the White House said that the discussions held were constructive. On May 27th, Trump said both sides were close to finalizing an agreement with strong inspections. Iran had made numerous concessions. Iran offered to build at least 19 additional reactors, suggesting that contracts these projects could help revive the U.S. nuclear industry. A settlement was undoubtedly possible. As part of the peace proposals, Iran offered to build at least 19 additional reactors, suggesting that contracts for these projects could help revive the U.S. nuclear industry. Araghchi's planned speech announcing this, however, was canceled. Iran offered to build 19 nuclear reactors with American companies. American jobs, American contracts, American nuclear industry revival, and that offer was on the table, and Araghchi's speech announcing the deal was canceled. Why? Because the war planning was continuing in parallel. Because while Witkoff was shaking hands with Araghchi and Muscat, Netanyahu and Trump were continuing to build their target lists. And because a peace deal was the one thing that would make the war impossible. War broke out just as the negotiations were making progress, suggesting that Israel and pro-war factions aligned with it within the U.S. administration feared the prospect of a settlement, even one involving painful concessions by Iran. It thus became clear that the objective was not to reach a settlement with Iran, but to bring about the overthrow of its ruling regime. The war started when the peace talks were working, not when they failed. That is the sentence that changes everything about how you understand February 28th. Decision 4. February 23, 2026, the phone call that set the date. Trump and Netanyahu spoke on Monday, February 23rd, and Netanyahu suggested Saturday as the day to launch because intelligence information showed that Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei would be meeting with key colleagues in a known location that day. Trump said he would consider this, but was waiting to see if the last-ditch nuclear negotiations with Iran would remain deadlocked. On Thursday, the CIA confirmed the intelligence on KA's expected location, and hours later, the negotiations in Geneva indeed collapsed. Trump then decided to go ahead with the opening strikes on Saturday morning, in which Khamenei was indeed eliminated. February 23rd, a Monday, Netanyahu calls Trump. He says, Saturday. He says, we know where Khamenei will be. Trump says, let me wait and see if Geneva collapses. Thursday comes, CIA confirms the location. Geneva collapses. And Trump says Saturday. That is how the date was chosen. Not strategic analysis, not a National Security Council vote, not congressional authorization, a Monday phone call, a Thursday CIA confirmation, and a Saturday decision, 5 days from phone call to the largest American military operation since Iraq 2003. By February 19th, the U.S. buildup was described as the largest in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. On February 24th, during the State of the Union address, Trump accused Iran of reviving efforts to build nuclear weapons and advanced missile capabilities that could threaten the U.S., Europe, and U.S. bases overseas. American intelligence reports suggested that alleged threats of long-range Iranian ballistic missiles were unfounded, with such capabilities requiring up until 2035 should Iran have decided to pursue the project. American intelligence said Iran was not close to a nuclear weapon, not for a decade. And 2 days after that intelligence assessment, Trump stood at the State of the Union and told Congress and the American people that Iran was reviving efforts to build nuclear weapons that threatened the United States. The public justification and the classified intelligence were telling two different stories. Decision 5, February 25th, 2026. Iran says peace is within reach. On February 25th, 2026, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi stated that a historic agreement with the United States to avert military conflict was within reach ahead of renewed talks in Geneva. February 25th, 3 days before the bombs fell, Iran's foreign minister used the word historic. He said the agreement was within reach. He was heading to Geneva. The Yemeni mediators were saying the same thing. The talks were the closest they had ever been to a deal. And 2 days later, the bombs fell on Tehran. President Trump launched a wide-ranging attack on Iran after weeks-long lobbying by an unusual pair of U.S. allies in the Middle East, Israel and Saudi Arabia. Israel was lobbying for the war. Saudi Arabia was privately lobbying for the war. And Iran was publicly saying peace was within reach 3 days before the first strike. Decision 6, February 28th, 2:30 a.m., the video nobody expected. At 20:30 a.m. U.S. on February 28th, Donald Trump released an 8-minute video statement on Truth Social, saying that the purpose of the U.S. strikes in Iran was effectively regime change. Trump said that Iran's menacing activities endangered the U.S. and its allies. He cited the Iran hostage crisis, support for proxies such as Hamas and Hezbollah, and its killings of protesters. Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu both warned of the potential threat of nuclear weapons in Iran and called on the Iranian people to overthrow their government. Tuesday, 30 in the morning. An 8-minute video on Truth Social. That is how the United States announced to the world that it had started a war. Not a press conference, not an address to Congress, not a joint session, a pre-recorded video posted to a social media platform at 20:30 a.m. while the bombs were already in the air. Pentagon briefers on Sunday reportedly told Congress that the U.S. did not have intelligence that Iran was planning a preemptive strike against the U.S. Trump claims in response during a press conference with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, "No, I might have forced their hands. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first." The Pentagon told Congress America had no intelligence of an imminent Iranian attack, and Trump said he might have forced their hands. Both of those things cannot be true simultaneously. Either there was an imminent threat that justified a preemptive war, or Trump forced Iran's hand. One of those is a legal justification for war. The other is an admission that the war was a choice. Decision 7, the one nobody made, the endgame plan. There is no organized alternative to the existing system of rule in Iran. Nor does the U.S. administration appear willing to deploy ground forces to manage a transition of power unlike in Iraq. The contradictory statements issued by the Trump administration regarding the aims of Operation Epic Fury also suggest that its decision-makers did not carry out a thorough evaluation of likely outcomes. All of this appears to have reinforced a growing conviction within the U.S. administration that a large-scale military operation could be executed at relatively low cost, aimed, according to Trump, at ending an Iranian threat that has persisted for decades. U.S. President Donald Trump appears unable to explain why he launched the conflict or how he plans to end it to an American public that feels it's paying the price. The 7th decision is the decision that was never made, the endgame plan that was never written, the post-war strategy that does not exist. Netanyahu had a plan to eliminate common. Trump had a plan to bomb 5,000 targets. Neither of them had a plan for what Iran looks like the morning after. Neither of them had a plan for who runs 90 million people when the government is gone. Neither of them had a plan for the Strait of Hormuz, for the oil prices, for the interceptor stockpiles, for the 7 Americans who came home in flag-draped coffins, for the 1,300 Iranians dead, for the 3.2 million displaced, for the 168 children in the school in Manab. The safest assumption is that the joint Trump-Netanyahu decision to attack Iran was made during Netanyahu's visit to Washington 2 weeks ago. The objective is not to merely degrade the Iranian nuclear weapons sites or hit its missile launchers, but force regime change. This marks a profound change in stated Israeli and U.S. goals. Experience, however, suggests that such strategies often lead to chaos, civil war, or both. Chaos, civil war, or both. That is what the Council on Foreign Relations, the most prestigious foreign policy institution in the United States, said the likely outcome of this war is not peace. Not a denuclearized Iran, not a free Iranian people, chaos or civil war, or both. Now, step back and look at all 7 decisions together. A meeting at Mar-a-Lago in February 2025 where 4 attack options were presented. A small forum in November where Netanyahu said eliminate KA. A year of peace talks that produced an Iranian offer of 19 nuclear reactors and American jobs, and a historic agreement within reach. A Monday phone call on February 23rd that suggested Saturday, a Thursday CIA confirmation that locked in the date, a 20:30 a.m. Truth Social video that started the war, and a 7th decision that was never made, the plan for what comes after. Trump seeks help opening the Strait of Hormuz as the Iran war chokes oil shipping. War rages on multiple fronts as Israeli attacks in Lebanon grow and Iran's shipping stranglehold persists. 16 days in, oil choke points still closed. 13 Americans dead. Interceptors running out, a new supreme leader in a bunker, a dancing missile that dodges everything, and a president who told NBC News that Iran wants a deal, but the terms are not good enough yet. The peace deal that was within reach on February 25 is gone. The 30,000 Iranians killed in the January crackdown are gone. The 7 American soldiers are gone. The 168 children in the mob school are gone. And the man who set the date with a Monday phone call is now searching for an exit that looks like the victory he promised. 7 decisions, 1 war. And the question that history will answer, even if this administration will not, is whether the 7th decision, the one that was never made, was an oversight or a choice. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This is the channel that does not just tell you what happened today. It tells you why it happened and what it means. When the next development comes, when the deal framework emerges or collapses, when the endgame becomes clear or disappears, you will get the full picture here. Subscribe. Tell me in the comments, after seeing these 7 decisions, do you believe this war was inevitable, or do you believe it was a choice that someone made in a room that you were never invited into? I will see you in the next update.